One of the world's busiest waterways, the Detroit River connects Lake St. Clair in the north to Lake Erie in the south. All three bodies of water are in play for the third and final Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit Super Tournament, which could be this summer's hottest slugfest. 209 of the best anglers in the world from Major League Fishing and FLW families are going head-to-head on these massive bodies of water that have been the home of legendary events. Though it's not one of the Great Lakes, St. Clair is part of their watershed and is a great lake for catching giant smallmouths. In 2018, the combined totals of days 1 and 2 broke the FLW Tour's 2-day total weight record with a whopping 6,046 pounds of bass. Dylan Hayes took off on the final day in the lead, but Pro Circuit champion Chad Grigsby and former Cup champion Brad Knight were hot on his heels.
That's what I'm talking about, baby.
With 430 square miles of lake to choose from, these three pros found themselves fishing within earshot of one another. In the end, it was Grigsby who made the right adjustments and hauled in an amazing 26 pounds and 4 ounces, giving him a 4-day total of over 97 pounds and a second Pro Circuit victory. Bass fishing icon Larry Nixon won his first FLW Pro Circuit tournament on St. Clair in 2001.
That was a great tournament. You know, I was on a lot of fish, and I had a special hole that I'd found in '99 here for the prior FLW tournament that I should have won. And boy, did I waylay them.
Oh, golly.
I mean, I caught them, and I caught them. I had more fun for about an hour there than you can imagine.
This one feels good. Look at that toad. That'll call something.
I kind of felt like I had it won when I caught the last big one that gave me up over 18 pounds. But you never know till it's over.
3 pounds, 7 ounces. Title goes to Larry Nixon.
That was my first FLW title, was on St. Clair.
Long wait, long wait.
I'd been to the FLW championship several times, but to get the first FLW win, that was exciting.
And 11 years later, a week before his 62nd birthday, he won his fourth. Fishing a quarter-mile stretch on the south end of St. Clair near Bell River, Nixon hauled in an impressive 84 pounds, 11 ounces of smallmouth, giving him his second St. Clair victory and making him a living legend on this lake and in this sport. In 2007, no one had ever led an FLW Tour event from start to finish before. Steve Clapper changed that. The Great Lakes icon made his 25-year dedication to catching smallmouths on Lake Erie finally pay off.
Coming to Lake Erie, being my favorite body of water, I decided that I'd throw my money in the pot and see if I could get in.
Stay on, baby.
Rough conditions, I'm used to that. I have my boat set up for rough conditions. I've had quite a bit of experience fishing in rough water. It's just something that we live with up here in the north because we have rough water quite often.
With a combination of drop shots and tubes, Clapper was able to go wire to wire, hauling in over 88 pounds of smallmouths in his first Pro Circuit tournament appearance. Erie, St. Clair, and Detroit have been home to some amazing record-breaking tournaments. Woo! And this year promises yet another. Anglers are competing for the coveted final Super Tournament trophy and record payouts, but there is even more at stake. Angler of the Year and Rookie of the Year titles are on the line, and the field will be set for the FLW Title Championship, the Super Bowl of bass fishing.
It's the tale of two tales. Here's our anglers got ready to blast off a little while ago this morning here on Lake Erie. Some of our field still en route, heading up to St. Clair, the dangerous, rough, risky ride up there. But with high risk comes high reward. That's the promise of world-class smallmouth fishing, 20-plus pound bags up there. While some of the field decided to play it easy, stay close to our blast off here and mix in some of these largemouth that live locally in Sandusky. But one thing's for certain for our nearly 200 anglers that are out on the water today, that it is all on the line because this is the final event of our regular season 2020 Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit events. And guys, you're going to watch it unfold live here for the next 4 days. Our full field blasting off there. Going to fish today and tomorrow. Only the top 50 will move on to fish day 3, and the top 10 will fish our final 4th day. Shot at $125,000 for that number 1 spot. Good morning, everyone, from the studios here in Benton, Kentucky. I'm Travis Moran alongside Red Gold Tomatoes Pro Todd Hollowell and MLF's very own Marty Stone. Marty, this is also the 3rd and final super event where we've combined the MLF anglers with the FLW family, and it has not disappointed.
100% agree with you there. We wondered what it was going to look like when we brought both of these worlds together, and I tell you what it's looked like. A lot of fireworks. The Bass Pro Tour anglers, they've had their hands full fishing against this FLW Pro Circuit group. And you could say vice versa as well, because it's sort of a draw right now. We had Jacob Wheeler win the first ever event, and then Tom Mansour breaking his very own record, being the oldest angler to win an FLW Pro Cert at La Crosse, Wisconsin. This thing has delivered, and it's taught me something that I've said from day one. This group over here at the FLW Pro Circuit, maybe everybody doesn't know the names, but these guys can fish.
For sure, guys, and a lot of history where we are this week. We're up on Lake Erie out of Sandusky, Ohio. A lot of history on Lake St. Clair, the Detroit River, and more history going to unfold this week in this super tournament. Lots of stories we're going to unpack this morning. The wind, big smallmouth. Do you chase largemouth? Do you make long runs? This is one of my favorite fisheries in the entire country. Smallmouth anglers love this place. There's going to be a lot to unfold.
Absolutely. And you talk about history, Todd. Let's go back just a week ago, La Crosse, Wisconsin. It was a grind on the Mississippi River. Is it going to be different, or are we going to see a little bit more of this?
I think there's not going to be a grind here. The question is can the guys get to the fish, and then are the smallmouth there once they get there? Here we're watching Zach Burge, who had a great event at La Crosse, Wisconsin, catch a couple keeper bass. So he made a run at it, made a good run to make this his first major title, but it wasn't to happen for Burge. But this week, it's going to be a lot more fish, a lot bigger fish, but weather will be the factor.
Burge off to a fast start. Another guy that we've gotten used to seeing here on the Super Tournaments, Mr. Jacob Wheeler, won the first one at Lake Chickamauga, had a great event here and made his case for winning at La Crosse. Doing it in 2 different pools. We got to see guys make the choice between do I lock, do I stay, and Jacob was a guy who took some risks early in the event. We're curious to see if some guys are going to take some risks early in this event and make it pay off. Jacob put on a show for us on day 4, doing it with mainly with a frog, mixing in a vibrating jig, a swim jig. Jacob just super well-rounded, fishing better than anybody in the game right now, arguably.
And then the godfather of the Mississippi River, Mr. Tom Mansour. You know, it's one thing to be the local favorite coming into an event, but it's another thing to be able to deliver. And he did. He held off the best in the business and held off one of the hottest anglers on the planet right now, Jacob Wheeler, and to win on his home water. Not only did he win on his home water, he put himself in great shape to make the title event that we've got sponsored by Toyota coming up in Sturgeon Bay.
Absolutely, guys. And while that event was about finding active fish, this event here this week is going to be about getting to those fish. Todd, why don't you break down some of the key places that are going to play?
Yeah, listen, we've got a lot to unpack here on live this morning, and you're going to get to see some of the best smallmouth anglers in this game break this fishery down for you on live. We're taking off out of Sandusky Bay, Sandusky, Ohio, a very famous place. A lot of people go up there on vacation in the summer. These guys aren't on vacation this week. They have their work cut out for them. This part of the of Lake Erie traditionally fishes very well, but you're going to see a big key right up there, and that's the dotted line in the red area. Canadian water is off limits this week. Pelee Island, a very well-known area for big smallmouth, and that North Shore completely off limits to these guys, so they have a tough decision. Do we fish around the islands? Do we stay close to takeoff? Do we make a long run to the east? Do we head west towards the Detroit River? Listen, 50 miles across Big Lake Erie, the wind's blowing this morning, get you the Detroit River, and maybe another 40, 50 miles up into Lake St. Clair. Lots of decisions, Marty. That's really going to be the story this week.
It is. Today and the week, we'll talk about the wind. We'll talk about it continuous. It's one thing to say I'm going to make a run up to St. Clair. It's another thing to actually do that. When you get ready to cross 50 miles of open water, somewhere about halfway there, when I come to the Great Lakes, I call it holy water. If you're not careful, you'll find religion out there, because the waves, the size, the volume of the water, if you're not used to this run, it can overwhelm you. And even for the veterans, guys like Scott Dobson, Matt Becker, guys that have lived on these type of bodies of water their whole life, you cannot describe the enormity of the challenge that's in front of them.
Absolutely, Marty. A lot of challenges here going to unfold here on Lake Erie, St. Clair, Detroit River. And you guys are going to watch it from 6 live cameras, a live drone. We'll be on YouTube, Facebook until 9 a.m. And then we will shift everything over to FLWfishing.com, where you always get the most extensive coverage, including our live unofficial leaderboard, where you can follow along on all the weights the anglers are reporting. But we still have our anglers right now settling in this morning. Nobody that we have fishing on live. But earlier today, we caught up with some of these anglers and got some of their thoughts on heading out this morning.
All right, well, here we are. It's day number 1 of the FLW Pro Circuit Super Tournament out of Sandusky, Ohio. A little bit of wind this morning. You know, it kind of blew overnight. We had a little front blow through, so hoping to get out there and see some small waves, but not so sure that's going to be the case. But this morning, we're going to make a long run, one of the longer runs I've ever made in my career, so we're going to take our time, get up there. Hopefully we get 2-3 hours of fishing and fill up this Phoenix live well with some big old smallmouth and make it back safe. So that's the plan for today. We'll see what happens.
Well, we're just about to take off here, a couple boats away. We got a pretty good run today. We're going about 50 miles. According to the weather buoy out in the middle of the lake there, it's blowing 20 plus. So sea's going to be a little bumpy out there. We'll just try to take our time. Make sure, make sure we stay safe and get there and back in one piece. It's nothing to mess with. It looks like it's going to calm down in the afternoon, though, so we should be all right coming back. But it's going to be a little choppy getting there.
Of course, day 1, Lake Erie, it has to be windy, so it's going to put everyone to the test. The guys got to be safe. They got to be smart, and more so, they just got to take care of themselves, because you can beat up your body here, you can beat up your boat, and you can get yourself in a lot of trouble quick out here. So looking forward to get out there, catch some fish, make it back, and go on to the Untitled Championship up in Sturgeon Bay. So with the way the wind is right now, it's blowing like 13 miles an hour out of the southwest with gusts to 20. So a lot of guys just think they can run right up to St. Clair. But the problem is you got 47 miles of Lake Erie to cross to get up there. So you really got to think about driving nice and slow. If you take your time, you can get there, but at what cost? I mean, if you break your boat, if you rip off your trolling motor, you rip off your grass, your prop comes out of the water too much, you could have throw a gear case, so there's a lot at risk, but there's big reward going to St. Clair. I'm going to kind of assess the waves when I get out there, and I'll just make a decision once I get about 10 miles out into the lake.
Marty, Scott Dobson there breaking it down. Is there anyone that understands the balance that you've got, or the things you're weighing when you make that risk more than Scott?
When I was visiting with him before the tournament, it was like I was getting a master's course on how to fish these lakes and how to run these lakes. And when you heard a couple of the guys talk about it blew last night, let's put that in perspective. There was a front that come through there, a straight line front. The Weather Channel calls it a derecho. And that means it's a long mass, covered over 700 miles of storm footage. Straight line winds come in, and the Midwest had winds in the 90 to 100 mile an hour marks in there. It was literally a hurricane on the land. Now, when it reached the Toledo, Ohio area and got out into the lake, a lot of the winds had subsided. But the problem with that is it was still in the 30 plus mile an hour range. And when that wind builds overnight, those waves just don't lay down. So what the guys are going to find is winds that are subsiding, but big waves are out there. But luckily for them, the afternoon forecast is calling for the winds to calm down some, but they're going to face some big water. Dobson understands the risk and the reward.
Absolutely. And then Todd, staying close Let's talk about some of those anglers. It's all about the run because we know the upside of that. We know what actually is up in St. Clair and the possibilities, but let's get into the mindset of some of these guys that are staying close and really trying to play it safe.
Yeah, there's really a couple of different mindsets going into this event. I mean, you've got guys who have locked up their title spot and they're safe, and they have to fish again here in a couple of weeks. So some of these guys are wanting to protect their equipment. They're wanting to play it safe. Some of these guys are going to stay in Sandusky Bay and just try to catch 12, 14 pounds, try to get a check, move on to the next event. That's not a mindset that's going to win this week. We're going to talk about that as this morning unfolds. But you've got other guys that are going to fish this event to win. And to win, they know that 4-pound smallmouth are going to be a big part of that. And so the question is, did some of these guys find enough areas around Sandusky, around the islands, and in Lake Erie to where they can compete and have a chance to win? Or do you have to make the run to the Detroit River, 50 miles? If you don't have any experience in the Detroit River, do you have to make the run up to Lake St. Clair? The thing about Lake St. Clair, we're going to talk about it all week, the fish population in general up there is just fantastic. A lot more numbers. Your odds of catching more, a good bag of smallmouth are better up there. The downside, Travis, is that you just don't have as much time. These guys may only have a few hours to fish when they get there. So a lot of questions. A lot of guys, trying to figure out what's the right move for them to make, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
Absolutely. And Todd, one of those guys choosing to maximize his time on the water today, Gray Buck, 30-year-old out of Green Lane, Pennsylvania, is one of the only anglers we have service with right now as well.
Yeah, so we're out here around on. I ran about 15 miles this morning. Didn't go make the St. Clair run or anything like that. Pretty good. In the point side, risk taking it back on all the variables that go into it. I had some fish out here on this shoal, so trying to get them going. Some units still for them today. Can't show up though. This spot, and then we're gonna start bouncing around a little bit and see what we can find. But we're just out here drop shotting our Z-Man.
As we heard a little bit of Gray Buck talking about his ranking, he's 5th in the points race, so he's going to make the Tackle Warehouse title event presented by Toyota in just at the end of August. So this is a quick turnaround. Guys, I know in sports, when you're going into playoffs, when you're going to that end of the season, you want to have a rhythm. It looks like Gray Buck right now is making sure he just has a clean tournament. He's not trying to overdo it in this final tournament when the only thing he could really gain is a little bit more money, when the real emphasis is going to be on this title event in just a couple weeks.
Yeah, we say that, but I'm going to tell you, I still think guys like Becker and Buck, I look down at this points race, and we'll talk more about that. I don't think it's a foregone conclusion Ron Nelson's going to win. There's going to be a lot of things that would have to go wrong, and we're not wishing anybody any ill will. But the minute you take a left or right out of Sandusky Bay, there's a whole lot of things that get out of anglers' hands. And Buck's talking about playing it conservative. The conservative approach sometimes is the winning approach on Erie. And, oh yeah, by the way, he happens to be with an eyesight of Justin Lucas, who we've got a camera with. We'll get some connectivity. There are winning smallmouth in Erie. The quantity's not there. But if you can only catch 5 and they all weigh 4 pounds, my math, that's 20. And there's no guarantee you're going to get to St. Clair and back, nor is there a guarantee once you get there, you're going to drop down on 20 instantly. we're already seeing good movement on the leaderboard.
Getting a quick look at an early start for a few guys. We see Justin Lucas and Josh Bertrand already on the board with 4-pound smallmouth. We're going to have cameras with them today. Looking forward to catching up with them, as well as Jonathan Van Dam, Scott Dobson, Matt Becker, and Gray Buck pushing for an AOI title. Lots of things to unfold here on live. And the thing to keep in mind, Travis, I guess, is a lot of our guys are still making a run this morning. They blasted off just over an hour ago, and some of them making maybe a 90-mile run. So we're going to have to be patient and wait to get some good footage from some of these guys. A few guys still already fishing.
Last night, you and I were texting back and forth, and I was showing you that line of winds that were coming through, and it was totally unexpected. And I got to learn the big word that I used already, derecho. That was from the Weather Channel. I got that on there, and it's literally a straight line of winds that cover hundreds of miles, and it comes through this area. And where Buck's at right now is in protected water on Erie. Oh, man. This is what protected water looks like. When you get out past those islands, I'll go back to that's when you're going to find the holy water. These guys will end up seeing 4 to 6 footers as they make that big run out there today.
And Todd, of course, on the unofficial leaderboard, seeing Bill McDonald already 11 pounds, 5 fish. I know that you were close to Bill. You guys talk a whole lot. And he's one of those guys that can really do some damage up in St. Clair, but he opted not to make that run.
Yeah, I talked to Bill last night, and, you know, Bill's got tons of experience up here. In fact, finished trying to listen to Gray here. We'll see if we can get some audio.
Just kind of there with my and then
Yeah, we're just in spotty service here with Gray Buck. But Travis, back to Bill McDonald, the guy that finished second here back when I believe the year Larry Nixon won. Spencer Sheffield was in the mix in that event. Those guys were all fishing Shinfukai in a similar area. Billy almost won that event. Loves Lake St. Clair. He's got a son that I'm good friends with. Brandon McDonald's really good in the Detroit River. Listen, Billy knows the Detroit River and Lake St. Clair probably as much as anybody in this field. But he said, Todd, I just can't make that run at this age, and it's not worth it to me. So he really felt like that he could catch 12 to 15 pounds 2 days in a row. He felt like the weights were going to be really tight in this event. He felt like that was going to be enough maybe to give him a chance to make the title. He's sitting just outside 50th place. Again, lots of individual stories playing out this week, and at the end of this season, guys trying to make the title, guys trying to win Rookie of the Year, guys trying to win AOI. Here's a guy that this is an interesting decision for me for Gray Buck, because I believe Gray Buck has an opportunity to win Angler of the Year, just as Matt Becker. These two guys room together. Dylan Hayes, they all room together. And they're all taking a little bit of different approach at this event, but you can get a good look right there of Gray Buck staying relatively close, Marty, out in the middle of Lake Erie.
When I talked to Justin Lucas and Bertrand after their practice, both of them made mention that they had found smallmouth in Erie, that they were comfortable with there. But Bertrand said it really well. He said the further you run, then the bigger the schools are. But there's enough big fish around close to Sandusky to do well. It's just small, isolated areas. Here we're getting a good look at the 2020 Angler of the Year standings coming into this event.
So Ron Nelson comes into this event, guys, with a 73-point lead. And with about 200 guys in this field, look, if Ron Nelson leaves the door open, there are about 4 or 5 guys that can walk through it. I'm looking at Spencer Sheffield, Dylan Hayes, Gray Buck, Matt Becker, all guys who are great with smallmouth, all guys who have good history on these bodies of water. What does Ron Nelson have to do to close the door on this AOI event this week?
He finishes 73rd or higher in the conversation. The rest of them can win, and it won't matter. But he's got to finish that. And on this lake, it's not a given. I mean, if you've never experienced these great lakes and the big waters out here, and the thing that I found very ironic coming into here, Ron Nelson's from Michigan. You watched last year, you watched this year. Man, he just makes good decisions after good decisions, but he's never fished on Lake Erie. That was shocking to me. But then you think about it, Lake Michigan, the state of Michigan, which he's from, connects to 3 of the Great Lakes.
I'm trying to figure out if you guys are trying to give hope to these other anglers or what. But I've gotten to watch Ron Nelson now for 2 years on live, and it's been absolutely amazing. And the one thing that every time I talk to him when he's leading these events and he's doing well, we check in on him, is how open-minded he fishes. It's not about knowing a body of water. It's about knowing bass and keeping that open mind where you change with the conditions and you just adapt and figure out what the bass want that day. By him doing that, he really limits how bad he can do. He's never all in on anything. He'll scrap anything and go to whatever those fish want in a particular day. And that is what has got him the Rookie of the Year and should have gotten him Angler of the Year last year if he wouldn't have had a terrible first day on his rookie season. And he's just carried that through now the last 2 years. And so I don't think there's much these other anglers can do than just cross their fingers and see what happens at the end of this tournament. Ron Nelson has earned every second of this, and I don't see him wavering at all now.
Yeah, $84,000 up to this point going into this last event, and then obviously cashes a check here, almost $100,000 going into the title. But here's how consistent Ron Nelson's been this year. Started off the season at Sam Rayburn in 5th. Made the top 10 there. Just missed the top 10 at the Harris Chain. Finished 11th. Finished runner-up, 2nd place at Lake Martin. So just a fantastic season before this COVID thing dropped down and kind of changed the landscape of our country and even in these events. So when we came back in these super tournaments, he finished 41st at Chickamauga on the Tennessee River, 12th last week at La Crosse. Where is he going to finish this week at Erie? And I think you've talked to him this week, Marty. What's his approach going into this event?
I'm going to tell you what stood out to me since I've got to watch him. The first day at Chickamauga, he had a chance for the wheels to fall off, and then he put together an 18-pound bag. And then the last day that we watched him at La Crosse, he ended up having a lower unit go out, and that's mechanical issues that's above and beyond and out of people's control. When we left him live, he had 2 fish. He figured out a way to get a limit. Travis, to your point, he keeps making good decisions. Limit the damage. This lake fishing very tough, that's advantage to Ron. Because now he can come in if he wants to take a conservative approach, go catch 5 largemouth, limit the damage that can be done here, get your 73rd or better and get out of here with the points race. I don't think he's going to make that huge gamble and end up at Lake St. Clair. So with this lake fishing tough, it's probably advantage him. But you still got to leave that bay and you still got to come back. And this is Lake Erie. Anything can happen.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, throughout the entire season, I would always ask Ron, so how about that Angler of the Year race? How does that make you feel? And he would never really answer that. He would kind of, that's just part of it. I'm trying my best, and we'll see where we fall. But I actually did see a direct quote from him earlier on this week where he said, look, I'm not fishing to win this tournament at Lake Erie. I'm actually fishing to win Angler of the Year title. And that was him kind of alluding that he's probably not going to risk making that run to St. Clair because there's so many variables that you're now leaving to just chance. And he said now it's time to focus on that Angler of the Year race, close this out. And so that's why I think we're going to see him fishing close and not taking too many big risks out here.
Right. I think one of the things that's going to be interesting is what is it going to take to finish 73rd and kind of sampling some of the guys. I heard weight predictions all over the place. I mean, I had guys tell me that they thought single digits a day would get paid here, that they felt like it was fishing that tough and maybe this big run wasn't going to give guys enough time to catch them in other places. There are people that believe that guys won't make it back to weigh-in on time and end up zeroing because of it. So I'm really curious to see if 11 or 12 pounds a day, if Ron Nelson can do that in a marina somewhere or is just somewhere protected and be smart about it. Is that enough, Marty, do you think, to finish in the top 75 in this event?
Well, 11 to 12, that's going to be close because we're talking about Erie, but I think you're dead on right there. You get to that 11 to 12 pound range, you really get to gauge to it after what's going to happen the first day. The minute you start fishing conservatively in this game, it bites you every time. And I appreciate the fact that Ron has, and when I've talked to him, he's always said, let's take it one day at a time, let's take it one cast. He's got a great perspective, a great mindset. I've been involved in my career with 2 different AOY races where I was in it to the last minute of the last event. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care how calm you think you are. You start thinking about it. When you're in the position to win coming into the last day of the last tournament of the year, it does start to weigh on you. Because those are titles to me that are legacy pieces. When you win that, you look at the list that we've got here of former AOY here, David Dudley, Brian Thrift, Andy Morgan, Clark Wendlandt, Jay Ellis. I mean, I can go down through this list. There's only great anglers on this list, and he put himself in that category. It's a huge, huge accomplishment. And I'll tell you, I think the odds are he's coming out of here with it. It's not going to be Ron having something that he does decision-wise that's going to cost him. But there's the mechanical part of this thing on a lake this big.
Absolutely. And then I'm just getting an update as we're going through Playing It Safe that Ron Nelson told one of the cameramen this morning that he's heading to St. Clair. So the competitor in him, because I know he believed he was going to stick around when he said that earlier this week, but the competitor in him, maybe he found something in St. Clair, but he sounds like he's heading up there, and we're going to have to see what happens and how it plays out here.
Look at that list right there. If you add up the money that has been won on that list right there, I think the three of us could retire and live happily ever after. This is stout. And when you're a guy like Ron Nelson, you put yourself in this elite group, it's something special.
You look at some of the names there, guys like Denny Brower and Peter T. and Kevin Van Dam. Guys, so much history on this list, this Angler of the Year list. Will Ron Nelson's name be next, or will it be one of the young guns?
Some of those anglers that did stick around but were confident in some bigger fish. I'm looking at the leaderboard. Josh Bertrand, 1 fish, 4.5 pounder. Justin Lucas, 1 for 4 pounds.
We got the great pleasure a couple of weeks ago watching David Walker up at La Crosse, our 1999 Angler of the Year, and a guy that we saw in the Wheaties box in prior decades. Put on a show with a frog and flipping up at La Crosse, Marty. I know he was having a great time, and when we went off the air, he went on a flurry and almost won the event.
He really did. He ended up with a strong event up there, but hats off to Tom Mansour who pulled that win off. And we're having a lot of trouble getting cameras up live, and we knew this was a potential to happen today. You're talking big waters. And the guys going to St. Clair, I'll go ahead and venture to say we're 8:30 in. They haven't made it there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they have
probably
not made
another
it
hour.
there. Talk about the big water runs. I don't think people realize when you go 50 miles across a lake like this. I remember on the Erie events having 3 bungee straps or ratchet straps on my trolling motor. I remember you got to bring all graphs off your front of the deck. You got to keep all rods in the rod box. And people say, why do you have to do that? I've seen waves and guys hit waves up there that will literally take a trolling motor and all your depth finders off. And that's back when we were running the smaller units up front. With the big units they've got up front now, you've got to take every bit of that and you've got to secure it. And then you look at how is the boat equipped? Do your battery straps, do they have just a little, what we would call, not Velcro, but just the thin straps in the plastic trays? That doesn't handle the Great Lakes. There's so much that goes into making a run. And if you're an angler like Becker or Dobson and others who are used to this, you prepare for that. If it's this first time you've ever made that run like this and you're not prepared for it, you'll get there and you'll have nothing to fish with.
Mm-hmm. Possible to show up without a trolling motor and a depth finder and then have to figure out how to catch them out in the middle of someplace like Lake St. Clair. And you know, the other thing that's interesting to me, I've spent, probably the last 10 or 12 years fishing up there, and I've had a lot of good friends teach me certain things. And when you're fishing on the Great Lakes or you're fishing on St. Clair, from point A to point B is not always the route that you need to take. And there are some guys figuring that out right now. You can't just take that boat out of Sandusky Bay and point it at the mouth of the Detroit River, because if you do, you will sink your boat. And so, sometimes it's better to head to the North Shore and then head west, or head west and then ride the troughs out. So a lot of guys who have big water driving experience, guys like Scott Dobson and Matt Becker, this doesn't really scare them, but you're going to see some rookies, some guys that have never been. I talked to guys who practiced almost exclusively on the Detroit River and up in Lake St. Clair and have never driven across this lake, and they are figuring some things out this morning that that they don't ever want to see again. But guys with experience driving on big water, understanding how to manage time. There's a lot of stress going into this event, and you know, one of the things we're going to have to do is just be patient and wait for these guys to get to where they're going. But I promise you, when they set the boat down, whether it's in the Detroit River, on Lake Erie, or on Lake St. Clair, these guys have found smallmouth. They're not really hard to catch up there. Finding them has been a challenge for these guys, but smallmouth are willing to cooperate, and they're one of the best fighting fish that we see on live, and we're looking forward to that.
Well, and speaking of the smallmouth, you know, just last week, Mississippi River, throwing frogs, we're throwing jigs, and it's the most beautiful shallow water fishery that you could ever imagine. But now we're pretty much the opposite. We're clear water, offshore fishing. What are some of the lures that we're going to see in play? What are the standards that really produce out here?
It's going to be a lot of the standard stuff that we see on this particular body of water. Drop shot will play. I know at the Sturgeon Bay event, we literally watched that event dominated by the Berkeley flatworm. I watched anglers sit beside other anglers that didn't have a Berkeley flatworm just get completely hosed. Here we're watching gray buck hooked up, so we'll watch a fish catch. Don't know what we have on audio.
That one might be a smallie. Not 100% sure. I felt like you wanted to jump it first. It might not be. I don't know. Oh, there's number one.
Talk to me a little bit about your experience on this lake, Greg.
So I have not fished Lake Erie out of Sandusky. I fished it out of Buffalo for a Toyota series a couple years ago. So I'm still, basically I came out here and was just learning, trying to figure out exactly how these fish set up, where they're going to be. I spent a lot of time idling just looking with my Lowrance graphs here. I was marking a lot of rock and whatnot down there, just trying to figure out where they would be set up. So I did a lot of that, even though I didn't get a lot of bites. It kind of just keyed me in where I needed to focus on. And today's one of those days, it's got the right conditions to make these smallmouth bite. When it's wavy like this, when it's got this nice chop out here, it makes them chew. I just don't know how many are really in this area, but I wasn't willing to make that run to St. Clair. Just with this wind and where I'm sitting at in the point standings, I didn't think it really made sense. So we're just kind of gonna hope we can get 5 bites, even if they're only 2.5 pounders like that. That's all right. We're gonna throw our Z-Man trick shot. That's the Gobi Bryant color on our Hayabusa hook. So hopefully we can keep picking them off.
One thing we haven't talked about on Erie is the population of drum. And there's so many of them out there, and on the depth finder, they look just like smallmouth. This is a lake that you literally have to fish and figure out what's using it. And those fish will coexist a little bit too. So an angler can feel like he's marking everything, but then when he sets up the fish and all he's marked is a huge school of drum. But Todd, he said something that's 100% true, and Lucas, he told me the same thing. When he found these fish out here on Erie, it was calm, and they weren't biting great, but these are the days, there's a fine line between too rough and the perfect rough for smallmouth, and where he's at right now, that's good water for smallmouth, isn't it?
So a lot of this is just based off different rock formations that are on the bottom. We started on a couple boulders, now we're on a scattered, just like flat that has a bunch of just chunk rock, and there's some little bigger boulders, but nothing like the first one we found. Usually those big ones they'll group up on I guess, I don't know if the wind moved them. They were there yesterday still. And I could see a couple down there when I get on top of them to drop on them, but they weren't interested in eating right now. We might come check that again in the afternoon, but it's just a lot of idling around and staring at your graphs and hoping you're gonna come across a school of them. It doesn't seem like they're really bunched up real tight here. I fished up at the Thousand Islands in Lake Ontario a bunch, and there you can idle around. You can go over a group and you idle over them. You'll see them all down there, and there'll be a tight school, and then you can work on them and just pick them off. Here, there's so many sheep's head or drum, whatever you want to call them down there, that you can't just idle around and look. You see all of them down there. There's just a lot of the drum that you're marking instead of smallies, so it's just kind of part of it, but you just kind of keep working around and catching what you can. And I think my best day out here this week, I still only had probably 9 or 10 bites, but that was in 13 hours of fishing, so we got to pick up the pace a little bit. But I guess it was at 8:40. We got a long day. We're not doing it until 4:45, so I'm hoping if I spend all day out here, I'll get 5 bites, and you'll see what kind of weight we have. Here's, call that the Erie Shuffle. Yeah, we got starts today, and then tomorrow, and then the top 50 are the next day, and top 10 after that.
Where you run out of?
Sandusky.
Todd, when you fish these big waters, were you a front seat guy or not?
Absolutely. It's great. You know, these young guys are standing up there. You can see Gray Buck's legs. He's an athlete, and you have to be an athlete. He had mentioned the Erie Shuffle. Reminds me of the Icky Shuffle, the Chicago Bears back in about 1985. But, yeah, definitely a butt seat for me. You know, this is a place that will try to send you out into the lake. It will try to buck you like a bronco. The last time I was up there in 2018, I tied myself to the boat one day, in fact. Maybe tell that story as this goes along. But getting a look at one of the best young smallmouth anglers on this Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit, Travis, Gray Buck, 30-year-old from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing about the seat, guys. And the one thing that's changed, though, is the spot lock features for the trolling motors. A little bit more forgiving. I know that you guys had to keep your feet on the trolling motor constantly, or you were going to be blown right off your GPS points, where I'm sure Gray Buck is locking in on these positions, and then he gets to just kind of do the dance and spend a little bit more time just staying balanced.
Oh, back in our day, too, it was so bad you would end up literally, you drift over a spot when the wind got really big. Then you crank up and then go above it and then hope to drift over it. We were about as inefficient as you could be. It was like fishing with 2 left hands almost. When I was looking at his record and talking to him for this guy right here is a hammer on Oneida and also in the Thousand Island area. He self-admitted he hasn't spent a lot of time down here before the event, but just having that northern knowledge of smallmouth. And I talked to him and a couple of other young anglers, and the thing that really jumped out to me, I asked him, why are we having success this year? And he said something that I look for in the young anglers when they talk about it. He's like, Marty, I had some days in tournaments and practice, they just weren't that good. So I just went fishing. What that's telling me with young anglers, they always want to be fairly structured. They think A should follow A, and then there should be B, and then there should be C. But when you see young anglers like Buck starting to figure out, just use your instincts. that's when you see these top 5 finishes in Angler of the Year happening. And I could tell that the maturation process had really started with him the last couple of years. He admitted in 2017, he'd never fished south of Virginia. So he's still learning how to travel throughout the country. But this is a part of the country that there's no surprise why we have a camera in the boat with him today. I like the Erie move. I'll go ahead. I'm going to make y'all another bold prediction. I told you at Mississippi River, the Frog would not win or play. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right here, St. Clair will not win this event. I'll go out on that limb, and here's the reason I say that. The winning fish are up there. I don't think a man can get up there 4 days in a row with the winds that are predicted. I just do not see that happening. And if they do, they win. But the bold prediction I'm going to make is there's no way. There's no way a man makes it 4 days in a row.
Gray Buck, one of the guys, we got our first look at him really on live last year in April 2019, where he made the cut at Cherokee Lake, catching smallmouth with a Ned rig, spawning fish there, and finished second at a great event. We got to meet Gray and his wife Jessica. They met each other at Penn State. They were on the Penn State bass fishing team, and both really good anglers. She likes to travel around and fish with him, and I always enjoy following Gray on social media. Got a lot of good informational stuff, how to catch them, how to use your electronics. Gray does a great job of breaking down what he does. And you know, the challenge on Lake Erie is you're battling current and wind and trying to set up on specific places, specific structure spots, maybe individual rocks. So you see, Gray's locked in this morning. He told me, I'm not getting a lot of bites, Marty. And so we're kind of on a ride along with Gray Buck this morning, and probably not going to hear a lot from him just based on the conditions and the challenges of not getting many bites. But 5 to 7 bites on Lake Erie. If you hook up with a smallmouth, you better land him if you're going to have a chance to have a good day on Lake Erie.
Justin Lucas, who we hadn't got the camera up and running, is not that far from him, and he said the same thing about Erie. He wasn't getting a lot of bites. I asked him if he was around the same quantity of fish he was when he won the Bass Pro Tour over at Sturgeon Bay and set every record known to man. He's like, no, not around the quantity, but definitely around the quality.
So Gray Buck on the board with his first fish. We're going to call it about a 3.5 pounder. Justin Lucas maybe right over his left shoulder there. We know they're fishing in a similar area, and we've got Lucas on the board with a 4 pounder.
Seeing some guys already, though, on the unofficial leaderboard with some early limits. Tyler Wolcott, Michael Neal, Tyler Stewart, Bill McDonald, all with limits this morning.
A reminder to all our viewers, we've got 6 live cameras out on the water today. Most of those cameras still making the run up to St. Clair, and hopefully they will feel up to actually recording when they get there and not be too beat up.
Our camera operators will earn their keep today. Can you imagine having that thing on your shoulder all day long, trying to balance and keep an angler framed up in this waves?
Well, and when you're talking about the Great Lakes, you can throw on being seasick out there. And I'll tell you, there's nothing worse than trying to look through a viewfinder like this. Because when you're trying not to be seasick, you're trying to keep the horizon, you're trying to stay focused, and looking through a little viewfinder and watching a gray buck bob up and down, you can definitely get a little wheezy out there.
Remember the first time that I ever experienced buffalo, which is west of where we're at, several hundreds of miles west of where we're at, because From Detroit to Buffalo, I think it's somewhere around the 250-mile mark that it is from one end to the next. And I'm sitting there in the weigh-in line that day, and I noticed a lot of the guys cut themselves shaving that morning because they all had a patch on the back of their neck. And I'm like, wait a minute, they all cut themselves in the... I didn't realize that you could have a patch that helped with the motion sickness, and I would say half of our field at that particular event had that patch on. And I remember drawing one co-angler that did not have a patch. And we didn't have a really good day that day. I did, he didn't. He was green within 20 minutes of being out on the water, and he never turned ungreen until he put his feet back on the land.
Yep, and as these anglers making that run, we are going to be bringing live coverage for 6 hours today. We're going to go till 2 p.m. and then the weigh-in, then we'll go off the air for a little bit, and we'll pick back up with the weigh-in at 3 o'clock, only on FLWfishing.com. Although the anglers, the flights go all the way till 5 p.m. today, so nearly 200 anglers will be weighing in. Plenty of live action here.
Some of our on-the-water reporters are staged up in that Detroit area, waiting for some of the guys to make their way through and starting to give us some feedback that they're starting to see some of the boats make their way through the Detroit River. So hopefully coming up in segment 2, we'll get to catch up with some of those guys. But so far here, getting to see Gray Buck and choosing to stay close, play it safe, fish Lake Erie, see if he can put 5 big smallmouth together and have a good first day.
You said it first thing this morning, so let's go back over that. From Sandusky, the mouth of Sandusky, to the mouth of Detroit River, 50 miles, and a lot of that's open water. And we heard Dobson talk about it. We heard Jonathan Van Dam talk about it. They were faced with 20-mile-an-hour gusts out there with the buoys. And then there's another 24-plus miles from the mouth of Detroit River all the way up to Lake St. Clair. A large portion of that is no wake. And then you've got from the bottom end of St. Clair all the way to the top, you're looking at another almost 20 miles.
So potentially 100 miles,
Yes.
one way for some of these guys.
Right. And it's not, this is what you're running in.
A little different than morning traffic on the interstate where you're listening to the radio. This is navigating big water, Great Lakes, and Lake Erie.
Guys, we've gotten to watch a little bit so far this morning. We got to see some anglers who's making the big runs and things. Let's start making some predictions. Marty, you already made a bold one, but what are the weights going to be at the cut line? We're paying out 50% of the field here on Lake Erie for our super tournaments. What will be that cut line, and then what will be the final check? What will be the cut line, and what's going to take you all the way into the 4th day?
I'll jump in and take that first. And I sampled several guys just trying to get a feel, and it really just depends on whether or not these guys can make that trip across this lake and get to the Detroit River, get to St. Clair, have enough time to fish. You really got to figure 15 pounds is a critical mark here. There's a lot of 3-pound class smallmouth. Detroit River, Lake St. Clair. You got to figure that pretty much all the guys that make it to those places and make it back, they're going to catch 15 pounds a day. And you really feel like in order to advance in this tournament that you're going to have at least 15, 16 pounds a day. Probably 12, 13 pounds, Marty, kind of what I'm hearing for some of the guys to get a check in this event. But, to make the cut, I really feel like 17 to 18 pounds is going to be critical to make it into day 4.
I'm going to go lighter than you on that, and it's a rarity for me ever to be on the light side. But I think because of the wind and the fact these guys aren't allowed to go into Canadian waters, I think to be able to make a check in this thing, we're going to look at 11.5 pounds a day, and then be able to make the cut, the top 50 cut after 2 days. I'm going to go with 13.5 pounds. I just think I think there's a lot of variables going on. Lake's fishing a little tough. We've got a lot of anglers in here that's never been to this body of water. The first time you ever show up here, it is completely overwhelming. I'll say 13.5. And then the wind, I'm going to have an asterisk by it. So if they could go every day and be able to get out on the big water, I feel pretty comfortable with 79 to 82. But if they end up getting held back, you better catch them these first 2 days. If you have 2 days where you can get on that body of water, day 3 they're calling for some pretty big winds. If you end up getting held back, then it's going to be a sub 70-pound wind in this.
There you go,
So
Travis.
there's your
there
predictions on that. I guarantee
I'm going
you in
heavy.
4 days.
Hey,
you
I'm
can
going to
fly
tell
a kite
you,
with that
these
one.
guys can catch smallmouth, and they have stones, my friend. They are going wherever they have to go, and they can catch them in an hour. I know guys that'll drive 4 hours, sit down, catch them in 30 minutes, and drive 4 hours back. I think there are guys that are going to do that on days 1 and 2. This is a tough event to practice for because they may not get out of Sandusky Bay come day 3. Hard to say how this is going to play out, but I'm going bold. I'm going heavy. Some of the best smallmouth anglers in the world in this event, and they're going to catch them. I promise you they're going to bring them into the weigh-in, Travis.
Absolutely. And Marty, you talked about them if they can get it all 4 days. I'm just getting word Matt Becker, Jonathan Van Dam, they still haven't even made it to the mouth of Detroit River yet. It is rough and nasty. These guys are having a challenging time so far this morning.
See, but the thing I like that I'm hearing with that is the fact that they're not there. And this is what I mean. Those two guys understand how important it is to take care of your equipment. You don't want to win this race. If you're blasting off in Sandusky and your brag is, man, I got to the mouth of St. Clair before everybody else and got there 30, 40 minutes ahead of everybody else, then you can go ahead and follow that up with, I tore up everything I've got. And when I got to St. Clair, I have nothing left to fish with. Becker and Van Dam understand, take care of your equipment. If they found what they think they found, these are anglers that only need an hour or 2 on their productive water. You know, you made mention some of these guys that catch them, they've got some. Yes, but we've got a large part of this field that has never seen a body of water like this. And the first time you ever run in a trough of water and you look up, and there's water above you to your left, and there's water above you to your right, and you can't see nothing but water in front of you, that is an overwhelming and exhausting feeling. Even if you get to where you're supposed to be or want to be, you're mentally and physically fried. Then you got to turn around and figure out how to catch them, and then the first time you drop down, and them darn smallmouth have moved 1.5 miles, and that happens all the time. There's so many variables in this tournament. Whoever wins this one will have stones and will have earned it.
Yeah. A lot of different ways to get across the lake, too. We'll break that down later in the show.
Airplane being a great one.
Well, guys, the anticipation is building here, and we're going to have some live coverage of these anglers as they get to St. Clair. Hopefully the next segment, but we will have it regardless because you got 6 hours of live coverage here today. Remember, for everyone watching on Facebook and YouTube, we're moving the live coverage over to FLWfishing.com for the rest of the day. Don't go anywhere. We've got plenty more from Lake Erie and the final stop of the Tackle Warehouse Pro Circuit Super Tournament season when we return.